welcome to Crawlspace. I'm Tim, here today alone in the Crawlspace studios for this intro, but Lance will be back soon. I know I keep saying that. He did make a rare Patreon appearance last week on Patreon. Check it out, patreon.com/crawlspacepodcast. His hiatus should be coming to an end soon, and we've got some new things to announce in the coming weeks. I want to remind you that our entire archive is on Stitcher Premium. Check that out at stitcherpremium.com. This show, Crawlspace, has been running since February of 2017, so all episodes are there. This episode today is a conversation with our new friend Naama Kates, who has launched a podcast called In-cel. And if you don't know what In-cel is, it is short for involuntary celibate. There is a group of men who congregate online on forums who identify as involuntary celibates. Naama has done a sort of a deep dive into this community to try to find out what they're all about. And some of the topics are very, very hot button. And some of the topics in this conversation are a little bit uncomfortable. We do talk a little bit about terrorist threats and mass shootings, because at least one mass shooting per year since 2015, one of those terrorists per year has identified as an incel. So one of the questions Naama aims to answer is, does this group radicalize? Is this group responsible, or is this something else going on? So you can see why it's kind of controversial immediately. And as I sit here and record this on August 6th, 2019, this past weekend was nightmarish in America when you consider two domestic terrorist attacks and mass shootings that happened in El Paso and one in Dayton, and over 30 people were killed and much more injured, and that's not accounting for secondary victims that we're so sensitive to here on these shows. So I think maybe it's more important than ever to take a look at some of these communities and the origins of how some of these things begin, because how else are we going to try to stop them? And I think maybe there's no need for semi-automatic rifles out there. Let's get those off the streets. Mental illness, yeah, that's definitely a topic to discuss, and we discuss it a little bit in this conversation. Certainly a problem in this country. Something needs to be done. Unfortunately, it doesn't sound like there are any easy answers, but I would say banning certain automatic weapons would be a good start. And the bulk of this episode was recorded a few weeks ago in the Crawlspace studios, and that was before these latest terror attacks over the weekend. But I wanted to chat with Naama real quick before we played the rest of the interview, because we do touch on terrorist threats, we do touch on mass shootings, and I just wanted to get her take on this past weekend.
So I know for a fact that while it was widely suspected that both, and certainly the second, the Dayton, Ohio shooter, was incel, late last night, an ex-girlfriend of his wrote an article for Medium. So he was not, and neither was the first shooter. They were on different sides of the political aisle. They were not incel, but it was definitely a topic that was widely discussed within their community, and it was kind of the first thought I had. The second shooter had made some kind of a list about people he wanted to rape, and he was violent and he was misogynistic, so there are some threads that certainly overlap there.
Right. And so what have the people in the community, the incel community that you're looking at, how have they responded to these attacks?
Well, they're very plugged in, actually. I find that they are on top of the news, and, they're hip and they're into all kinds of social media. That you follow all these different people on different platforms that I've started to now. So they were very quick on the scene with that story. And I actually, I found out about the identities of these shooters from them. And, they were right. We found one of the guy's Twitter feeds in the other, but they were speculating on that question too. And a lot of them believe that even if he wasn't technically identifying himself with that title, he probably was, this was before the article by the girlfriend came out, they think that their causes for being unhappy with society are, likely to be things that would motivate people like this too, unfortunately.
Right. So anger towards a certain group of people. In Incel's case, sometimes that's women. I think in this latest terror attack, that was maybe politically motivated.
Yeah, I think they were both claiming to be politically motivated. The first one is some people are, he was targeting immigrants or something like that. And the second one was aligned with Antifa. There was also the Garlic Festival shooter just last week. And what I'm finding is that while these people claim sort of an ideology, they are not so much that they're just angry at the world in general. They feel worthless and useless, and this is the way they take their vengeance out on the world.
Now, in your look at this community and recently, after these attacks, are these people, the incel community, are they condemning these attacks? Are they supporting them?
They do not support them at all. But there is sort of a mixed. What's happening? And I don't know if you know about this, but 8chan it was deplatformed. 8chan was sort of an offshoot of 4chan, and a lot of very politically incorrect people go on there, and it was deplatformed. And Cloudflare was the company that provided their protection of the website, their DNS registry, and so they kicked them off, and now 8chan has found another company to do that. So I don't see anybody actually supporting these acts. The conversation becomes about deplatforming and speech.
Have you seen any warning signs of terrorist attacks or people planning mass shootings or anything like that?
No, I haven't, but I know that the forums do ban people who do that. Their main websites will just ban people if they make any kind of threats of violence. Maybe one individual that I've spoken to that I might be concerned about, and he has never made any kind of jokes or talked about supporting any of this. I just mean I would be concerned about him psychologically. So I have begun to talk with people that research CVE, it's counter-violent extremism, especially about online extremism, that are researching this topic from the academia, the universities, as well as some outreach groups in DC. And I'm beginning to collaborate with those people. I feel honestly that they're a lot better equipped to handle this question than I am. But I guess my involvement with the community allows me to make a connection, to open the channels between this group of people, the incels, and the experts who are trained in, psychology and in extremism. I'm not an expert on any of these issues. I'm just a conduit between them. So I don't really feel like it's my place to make reports or recommend procedures or anything. I'm just kind of a channel.
Okay, so there's a little bit more with Naama Kates, and here is the rest of our interview that was recorded a few weeks ago in July at the Crawlspace Studios. Make sure to check out Naama's new show. It's called In-cel. There are links in the show notes. Thank you very much for listening. Welcome to the Crawlspace Studios, Naama Kates. How are you today, Naama?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well. You are here because you're our friend, and we met you last year. You participated in some Patreon things with us, notably our weird friend Scott. But you're here today talking to me about a new show that you are producing.
Correct.
With Crawlspace Media, and it's called In-cel, and you may have seen the feed drop. You may have seen us online talking about it. But What is this show?
This show is it's one that I've been sort of putting together in a very kind of disorganized way for like almost a year, but it's really only in the last several months that I've actually made it into a cohesive thing. Mm-hmm. And it is about incels. And as you said in the intro to the feed drop, that stands for involuntary celibate.
Yeah.
And it is a sort of a status, a way that people identify almost now. It's an identity. And so there is a large growing sort of community of people who identify as involuntary celibates, and they have their own little subculture.
And it's mostly online?
Almost entirely, yeah.
Almost entirely online. Have you come across anyone who identifies as an incel who has met another person who identifies as an incel in person?
There are a couple people who've told me, that's a question I ask all of them. There are a couple people who've told me that they have met in person from knowing each other online. Uh-huh. I don't really know how true that is, because they don't, I don't, not that they're lying, but it's very uncommon. They don't really hang out together in person. That's even something that they talk about in their forums, like, will we ever have a meetup?
Interesting. Okay, so I do remember you came in here last summer and you started talking to us about incels, and that was definitely the first time I had ever heard of it. And I probably gave you a look like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, why are you talking about this? And then you started telling us that you are interested in the community and that you're considering a project on it, and we're all about it. I mean, at that point, we just wanted to hear more, and it's super interesting. And obviously, our roots are in armchair sleuthing and kind of digging into these subcultures, notably the people who are obsessed with Maura Murray's case. That's how we got our start in podcasting. So I kind of feel like you're starting at a place where we started, whereas you're going kind of underground in this community, trying to meet a lot of these people, trying to understand this community.
Yeah, that's right. And Maura Murray was also kind of my introduction into, podcast obsession and true crime and sort of strange phenomena obsession.
So tell us about incels, because one of the first things you told us was there are Beckys, there are Chads, there's a red pill, there's a blue pill. Can you break down what these things mean?
Well, how much time do we have? I will cover a little bit of it. So Beckys and Chads are kind of not really like a central focus of the group, as I've come to find out. Okay. But it is sort of slang that in their community, a Chad means like a good-looking guy, like a sexual predator in the top 20% of men.
Okay.
And a Becky is, the slang for like there's a Stacy's and Becky's, and Becky's are kind of like the more intellectual women, I guess. They don't really use those terms that much, though. The pills, there are several different pills, but the ones sort of note are blue pill, less of note, but good to make the distinction, red pill and black pill. And blue pill kind of, they're sort of collections of ideas. I wouldn't want to call them ideologies, but like they have their ideas about things, and some of the incels get really specific about this, and it's very interesting. But blue pill kind of stands for people that buy into the fantasy that all the rest of us buy into, that looks are not the defining marker of how successful you'll be in relationships. And a lot of them consider that a fantasy.
Oh, so they don't believe that to be true.
They don't believe it to be true.
So if you take the blue pill, then you think it's your life is dictated by the way you look?
Well, no. The fantasy is that incels believe this is a fantasy, but like blue pill means that you do believe that personality matters, that you don't believe it's just looks. Okay. So we are all blue pilled if we believe in that.
Right.
So normies, so to speak, are blue pilled.
Okay.
Red pill it's kind of in between. They tend to be anti-progressive. They believe that like women's rights or technology to a large extent has led to this sort of imbalance in the sexual forecast for men. That's groups like MGTOW, Men Go Their Own Way, and to some extent like the manosphere, they tend to come off very misogynistic. They're also, maybe kind of like traditionalists. And I'm not talking to them really. That's maybe even a bigger population. Incels tend to be black-pilled. And the black pill believes that that looks are, they really do. It's the most important thing for women especially. That women especially judge based on looks, and they won't even give you the time of day if you are in the bottom sort of 30% or so.
Okay, and when you say that, you mean like percentage of looks?
Yes, percentile of looks.
Yeah, just I have to stop you because it sounds like they're very obsessed with looks.
Oh, yeah.
Just to put percentages on that.
That they are, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Go
yeah,
ahead,
if I was unclear about who's obsessed with what, I'm sorry.
No, it just sounds like all of them, even though there's a certain pill, like the blue pillars, aren't necessarily...
Well, we are all blue-pilled. In their the way they believe it, the blue pill is people that aren't taking the red pill or the black pill. It's just everyone else. Yeah.
Okay.
So like we would be like blue-pilled if we don't believe in that, and just most of society is by their estimation. But the red pill and the black pill, they do think that like women specifically choose based on looks, and then money, and then status, and personality is not even in the mix.
Okay. How did you come to delve into this community?
I was actually DM'd. I'd heard about it. I found it interesting. I think there was like an SVU episode that talked about it a little bit. Mm-hmm. And someone messaged me on Twitter when I first started using it again, which was not long ago. I thought that they were just like interested in, I don't know, the things people on Twitter, if like a person of the opposite sex sends you a message on Twitter, you think it might be like a romantic thing. Or maybe it's like a work-related thing. And I thought it could be either. I thought it was like a work-related thing because of my interactions with like you guys and everything, Yeah. And they seemed to be like very political, and they had like a YouTube channel and stuff. And so I thought it would be something about that. But then we started talking, and I realized it wasn't. And so I asked them what is the nature? Like, what do you want to talk about exactly? And when I suggested that like it might be like some kind of like not a pickup, but just like, a romantic gesture.
Yeah.
They were so like indignant and like offended that they would never, like, why would you think I would ever do that? I would never like come on to somebody. And I was like, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. I'm just asking. And then like the more he kind of responded to that, I was like, do you identify as incel? Because I was aware that this was a thing. And he said yes. And so we started talking.
So he found you randomly on Twitter?
Yeah.
Had you had a footprint or a thumbprint in the incel community at all at that point? You'd never like posted anything?
No.
Okay, so this was just a random thing. You were interested in this subculture, this kind of small group ultimately, and one of these people who identifies as an incel contacted you.
Yes, I was interested in like only peripherally. Like I wasn't really actively interested in it. I just found it interesting from the little things I'd read here and there.
Okay.
So it wasn't even like it was something I was at all passionate about. It was a random encounter.
And then from there you started talking with that person?
Mm-hmm.
And then you started talking with other people. You started getting in on the forums?
Yes.
Okay, you started talking with other people. And what was the root? Like, why, I guess, is the question I'm asking.
I don't know, really. I want to talk about that on the show. I'm very interested in, like, online, like, technology and identity online, the way it affects people to have this life, this, like, other life where you're presenting as something else, and the people you speak to are different, especially with young people. And I remember, I always had the internet growing up, but it was, like, an earlier phase of it, and I loved just kind of having like profiles and talking to random people. So, and I was an actress, my career started that way. It's kind of a version of that. I've just always been fascinated by it. So And it's also like the culture's like interesting. Like, there's stuff in it that's really offensive, but it's like led to this like whole dictionary of new words that are being used not just by incels now.
Yeah. We're going to get to all this.
Yeah, okay.
How many, do you have an estimation of the population size?
Well, the main website now has 10,000 members. That's not everyone. There's also like a subreddit that is quarantined, so it doesn't show the member size. A lot of them would estimate that it's millions or something. I don't really know, but it's certainly at least 10,000.
And so I want to be clear that your project is it more about recruitment for this community, or is it more about like an attempt to understand this community?
It's definitely an attempt to understand it.
Okay.
It's about people too.
Okay, and you've mentioned some of the mass media articles and videos that have been produced on this kind of show it as a scary community. And why is that?
Because there have been crimes, like spree killings, going back to 2014 that were committed by self-identified incels. The first one being the Isla Vista shooting in 2014 that was on the college campus. And then followed each year, there's been like at least one that was associated with it.
Each year?
Each year, at least one. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Confirmed.
Wow, okay. So I guess another part of your show and this experience, this sort of social experiment too, maybe, is asking the question, does this group lead to violence?
Yeah.
How are you feeling about that at this point?
Honestly, for the most part, I don't think it does. I really don't. I think that even though it is scary that there have been these spree killings on random strangers sort of done in the name of being upset with society to lead to this life sort of situation, to have 5 of those is terrifying, but it's still statistically not a significant portion of a population of tens of thousands or more, not any more so than any other kind of population. And there might be some people that are very disturbed, isolated and disturbed individuals that might be sort of inclined to possibly do something criminal or even violent. But I don't think that this is the cause of it if they get into these forums. I think that would just kind of be, that's someone who's not stable, regardless of what they're reading online.
Okay, yeah. So there's that's interesting that you're trying to sort of differentiate between people who are just already antisocial and kind of find any community online to be a part of, or someone who started there just randomly and then were sort of made into a killer or something like that. Yeah,
and I think that can be said for even, the crimes committed in the name of like the jihadi movements like ISIL. There were a few of those they were lone wolves. They hadn't had any interaction with anybody from those groups, but they kind of said that they did this in the name of that. And, that's happened with like white supremacists and stuff as well. And it's kind of, I think it's questionable that what they were reading led them to do it in that case.
Okay. And but this is something that the government is taking seriously. There was an Air Force briefing, or I guess a military briefing, on the sort of a threat assessment of this group. And there's an article posted just about a month or so ago by Jared Keller that kind of talks about this.
Oh, yeah.
So it is something that's being looked at by the government as like a terrorist threat, or
yes, as potentially
something
destructive actors. Yeah.
Yeah.
In addition to that there was recently a sentence that was kind of controversial of a 25-year-old who had not done anything but had threatened violence, had threatened some kind of mass shooting, I think.
Oh. And,
he was given a jail time, 5 years prison, and that was kind of not been done before.
But the government has, or I guess Mr. Internet, I don't know if that's the government, but someone has sort of tried to control this online activity, right? Like people have taken down some of the pages and forums that they have up there?
Yes, they are doing that constantly.
Is that Mr. Google or who is doing that?
Mr. Google's doing it. Mrs. Reddit is doing it.
Okay.
And others, Wikipedia. They're constantly sort of, I've found that incels, their community tries to put things up in Wikipedia, which is supposed to be edited by, the community or whatever. And those get taken down. And then Google, if it sees search results on certain terms leading to what they sort of put out, they will delist it. Reddit has banned their groups and quarantined the ones that still exist. And their original website was taken down. The domain was just pulled. Yeah.
Okay. So Reddit, Twitter, Discord you had mentioned earlier. That's a place where a lot of incels gather.
Discord hasn't done anything that
they
I
haven't
know.
Censored at all.
Mm-mm.
Okay. How do you feel about the censoring part of this?
I think it's a problem. I understand the impulse.
Yeah.
A private company certainly doesn't want to be responsible for propagating, any kind of incitement to violence or misinformation. But I think that not giving people a platform ends up, first of all, it could cause more distrust, more discontent, more feeling of being alone. But then also it leads them to only be able to talk amongst themselves, not with the outside world, which could certainly lead to an echo chamber and magnify the perspectives more.
Yeah. Now, is this group mostly men?
And almost entirely men.
Almost entirely men.
Most of them don't believe that women can be incel. It's like the first rule of Fight Club.
Well, that's really interesting because if I'm not mistaken, a woman started the entire thing, right?
Yes.
Yeah, take us through that. How did it begin?
Well, the woman that started it started the usage of the term. Her name was Ilana Boltwood, and in the 90s, she started a project. She was in university called the Involuntary Celibate Project that was, meant to be kind of just a place for people to share their own experiences of having like romantic or sexual rejection.
Was it kind of meant as a joke at first?
It wasn't meant as a joke. It was, she was researching kind of loneliness and social isolation.
Yeah.
So it was a research project, but it was like an inclusive forum. And she abandoned the project at some point. I know more about some of her personal reasons for it, but I won't get into them now. And then it kind of flurried back up, later on, 10 years later, in forums online, and it gradually kind of became what it is now.
Now, when we put this your trailer out earlier on our feeds earlier this week, got back some interesting feedback. One woman on Twitter, Mary, said that, I don't know how to feel about this new podcast. I'm really frustrated that a podcast that often discusses violence against women would greenlight a sympathy piece on a group of men who blame women for their problems. Maybe I'm missing the point, but I won't be listening. And you responded right away, thanking her for her comment and opinion, which I agree. I think that's important. You need to listen to the ideas that people have, and I guess coming from a place where she's I take it a Missing Maura Murray listener, or maybe a Crawlspace listener, which I guess we do talk about violence against women often. But I responded saying I wouldn't call it a sympathy piece. So what would you call it?
It's an exploration into a topic. I wouldn't call it a sympathy piece either, but I do think that there's been a real lack of any neutral or anything other than like a really unidimensional look at the group, even stuff that's very snarky, and I just don't think that that's the whole picture. I also think that I completely understand her point of view, but I think that only covering it this way will scare people, and it's not necessarily going to help.
Yeah. Okay, but she goes on here to say that it was her understanding that incel name itself is based in blaming women for their problems. The blame of other people and hatred towards women is common factor in a lot of violent people. Is this community made up of men who blame women for their problems?
I wouldn't say that is the common factor, or even something that if you go to, it's interesting, the different sites have sort of different personalities. If you go to like the subreddit, you do get a lot of people who just kind of spout this stuff. They're just kind of complaining, and it comes from, I think, online culture just being a place where like young people vent and say horrible things. It's kind of almost encouraged. And there certainly are some that do that, but for the most part, they don't blame women. They kind of think that society is to blame for, the black pill actually thinks that a lot of this is just kind of like biological, like scientific, that we are lookist. Like lookism is a big deal, being
Lookism.
Yeah.
What is that?
It's judging people based on their looks, like,
Okay.
you can sort of see the ableism is something that people talk about now. I don't know if you've heard that, but like it's not from incels, it's just being able-bodied or not. If people have a handicap, like people talk about ableism.
I see.
And it's like it's like racism or sexism.
Okay.
So yeah, they believe that lookism is a thing, and they sort of, at this point, I feel like a lot of them are not even like, they're not blaming women. They don't talk about women very much at all. They talk about society and the culture and the media for kind of making it, at this point, it was initially for making it like harder for them, for the lowest tier of men to kind of be successful or happy in society. And they blame a lot of societal attitudes and stuff. But now I think in 2019 at this point, they're more just trying to get the hate at bay. People who do know what incels are, a lot of them have the same ideas that Mary did. I did before.
Okay. So you're taking a deeper approach. Like you understand that it seems like from my perspective too, like a lot of what people out there know about incels is, it's a bunch of men who gravitate on certain sites and they talk shit about women and, oh, fuck that woman, I can't get laid. I hate that guy. I hate all them. They hold power over me, so I'm resisting in this way, this angry way.
Yeah. But
you're taking a more well-rounded approach to that.
Yeah.
So I know you said that there's some of that out there, but it's mostly probably young people are just kind of throwaway comments.
Yeah.
Like, what is it that you're learning?
What I'm learning is that a lot of the people that I'm talking to now are actually really trying to provide a sort of environment where they can go, members of this community can go and not feel made fun of. They are trying to kind of, even a lot of them will try to like help each other cope. They'll give advice about how to sort of better yourselves, your appearance or whatever. Like there's looks maxing, that's a site and a concept.
Okay.
And just kind of like better yourself so that you can ascend from being an incel.
Okay, so ascend
Graduate.
into
normie status, I guess. They're having a relationship. Yeah.
Okay.
Not being an incel anymore. So they do try to like help each other do that. They also try to just be there for each other.
Do you agree that like maybe these guys, like with just a little more effort in, I don't know, going out to a social situation, they wouldn't be celibate? Like if they don't want to be, I think a lot of times it's more about effort than about your looks or about someone else or anything.
I think it's effort. I do agree that in some cases it's effort. I think in a lot of cases, though, it's not effort so much as honestly mental health kind of counseling.
Okay.
Help with that there is a huge overrepresentation of all kinds of mental health issues that are legitimate, and that you can't just effort your way out of in certain cases. And then I think also kind of time and maturity. A lot of these guys are very young, and I feel like as a young person, a lot of people struggle with that stuff and identity in general. And I think that they probably more than most, and it also goes on later in life than it would for others. But you don't find a lot of them that are over that are not in their 20s or under. And so I feel like when people mature, both they are less obsessed with these ideas. It seems like less of a big deal. And for outsiders too.
That's fair. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, this is like a community that kind of seems like it's defined. Like it seems like it's got places and things that it wants to accomplish, but it also sounds confused to me. What direction do they want to take, like as a group? Is it just a bunch of individuals spouting ideas? Is it a coordinated group in any way?
Lack of organization was certainly one of the features that I think kind of defined it for a long time, that there wasn't really like a leadership in it.
Mm-hmm.
And I certainly saw it that way, and that could be problematic. Interestingly, though, recently I've started to speak with the people who run the websites that they all go to,
Mm-hmm.
and who started them, and they are leaders. You know, they are showing leadership. And what I've heard when I've spoken to them, by and large, is that what they want for the group is actually fair media portrayal. They've even said not necessarily good, but just not
Naama
all
Kates,
bad.
here you are. You're their white knight. You're walking in here trying to give them fair media coverage. I mean, is that not your attempt here?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. Because have been some, and I think the very first line of your episode discusses a Washington Post piece entitled, what is it called?
Men are in trouble, incels are proof.
Okay, and so you find that is the slant, I guess you'd call it, that most media outlets take on this?
I wouldn't even call that one slanted. That was actually kind of a more fair piece, because it was talking about how incels are proof that we have things going on in society that are, leading to some social problems. I think she speaks about, isolation that results from technology, kind of social media, all of that. So that one wasn't even slanted. That was actually my favorite one. Most of the articles are kind of, they do sort of unidimensionally portray them as threats, as sort of like terrorists. They make a lot of those comparisons, and they also kind of laughingly dismiss a lot of their ideas and laugh at them, period. And I don't think that's great.
Yeah, I think that probably comes from a place of not understanding.
Yeah.
Well, again, I think that's good that you're here trying to understand them. Is there a group of women that exist, like, that you found on the internet, kind of the yin to this yang?
Well, I don't know if I should get into totally what I'm finding or some of the things about what women are going through, I think, as a result of similar circumstances like social media and dating apps and stuff. It's very different.
Okay, so that's more of a group of women kind of commiserating with the issues that they
I wouldn't
are
even
facing?
say I wouldn't even say it's a commiserating. I just think that what's going on with women as a result is different, and it's not really a group. If you're looking for like a yin to the yang, I don't think there is quite one. I think it is a male issue.
Okay.
But I think that the experience that women are having as a result of dating apps and social media, young women, I'm talking about, that like really grew up with this, are just affected very differently by this phenomenon. And that might be all I should say about that at the moment. Yeah.
Okay. Your approach to this podcast, you are joining these communities online, or at least observing these communities, and you're eventually messaging some of these folks to maybe get an interview. And which folks do you target?
Oh, well, that's a good question. I target the people whose writing sort of stands out to me. This is the only information I have about them is what they write on these forums. Some of the writing is great, and that's, who I target.
Okay. So someone who is probably has a little bit of an idea of why they're there?
Yeah, someone who seems kind of insightful about it. Mm-hmm.
Self-aware?
Yeah.
Okay, and then how do you approach them?
That runs the gamut, and that's been certainly interesting. As you can imagine, a lot of them are very anonymous, and they don't have links to any of their other social media usernames, certainly nothing about their actual identity. And I don't know most of their identities, but I'll find ways. A lot of compulsive sort of Google searching, you can find connections to things when you do that a lot. And the ways that I've gotten in touch with them has really varied quite a bit, but it's all been internet searching.
And when you approach them, do you say, I'm Naama, I'm doing a project on incels? Basically,
yeah.
Right off the bat, that's what you say?
Mm-hmm. I mean, at first, when I wasn't as comfortable with it, I wouldn't say my actual name, and I used kind of like a burner account to do it. And I would just say, like, hey, do you have time to talk about some of these things? I've read some of your stuff, maybe. Pretty quickly, I realized it wasn't like a dangerous thing, so...
Okay, and then the people that you've contacted, most of them have been open to talking with you?
I don't know if most of them have. That's kind of, I'd say most. Yeah, probably most. There have been a couple that haven't responded, but yeah.
And do you say, I'm doing a podcast? Is that, and I would like to talk to you for this podcast?
Yeah.
Interesting. And, okay, so, and sort of under the guise of their anonymity, they're willing to be a part of the project?
Yep. And, it's a small-ish, it's not a tiny community, but it's not huge, and they all kind of get together, a lot of them in the same places. So news travels fast. So, it pretty quickly, once I started doing this, like, a lot of them would soon have an idea who I was.
So you've been spoken about within the community, undoubtedly.
Yeah.
And how many interviews have you gotten? How many different people?
I have like 7, I'd say, like main characters at this point, and then a few others in addition to that. But it's like 7 people that I've like spoken to and recorded audio. Some people I just spoke to kind of online.
Okay. And the format of your show now, is it going to sort of like let the story unfold as you go, or are you like actively going to get deeper into their sort of ideology and ideas? Like keep it surface level in the beginning and get deeper into, is there a political thing going on and things like that?
I'll definitely do that. I mean, there's no other way to do it than that, because you have to introduce it first. I approach every conversation without fully having an idea of where I want it to go, because I don't think that's terribly interesting to know exactly what you're going to say and points you're going to make. I kind of let it be a living thing and evolve into what it is. And I'm doing that a little bit with the show too, but absolutely, like all these things that we're talking about, like what's political and where's the crime that's related, and sort of the mental illness and the different pills and ideologies and the different websites, those will get into more detail as we go. But honestly, I think the people that I'm talking to, it's about them, and that's kind of something that's guiding the story as well.
And so they're trying to explain to you what the community is? Is that like most of what your conversations are?
Yeah, they end up, going a little bit outside of that, because I don't want to just limit it to that. Some of them are very interesting, Do
you find the same themes keep coming up in these conversations?
Oh, yeah.
Do politics keep coming up?
I want to be careful about how we use that word. I would say it's hard to not be political at all when talking about these things, but not politics in the sense of like, I'm a liberal, I'm a conservative, I don't like, not that way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, as far as the shooters and the crimes, the mass shootings that have happened by self-described incels, have you come across anyone who has talked to those people before their crimes, or anyone who has like talked about those crimes glowingly, say?
No.
Nothing like that. Are they revered in this community, like in the way like Columbiners or whatever revere those people?
No, that's a misconception that even the military has. When they talk about ER, I don't want to say the name too much to glorify shooters or whatever, but it's Elliot Rodger, who was the Isla Vista shooter.
Okay.
And there are a bunch of sort of others that like had notable events. When they use those terms in the forums, like there's some people talk about going ER. It's like Elliot Rodger.
Yeah.
They are doing it to be shocking, and they're kind of doing it also to throw off outsiders sometimes. It's very much like 4chan in that way.
Yeah.
Most of them just completely denounce them. But some of them understand a little bit of like why they are they're not revered, but why there's like some sympathy for it. And I've had one that's kind of explained it to me, but they're not revered, no.
Now there's one video, I don't remember the fellow's name, but he shot a video of himself in the car before
That's him.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Now this is a guy who wasn't particularly unattractive.
No.
This is a guy who I'm sure could have had relationships if he wanted to.
Right.
So what's going on there? Is this just like is this just an individual case essentially in the case of him? Or
Definitely.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, definitely.
So he was going to do that no matter what community he found.
And the community wasn't even a known thing at that point.
Yeah.
I mean, it began to get these associations after him, which is why people think he was like revered or whatever. So it wasn't even like he was reading anything that led him to do that, because he was some people do call him, Saint Eliot. It is a joke. But
I'm just confused, like, if he's Saint Eliot, but he's also like, if you look at that guy and they're giving percentages to everyone,
Right.
like he's got to be in the 80 to
He is.
90%,
Yeah.
and
And
so he's still Saint Eliot then if he's...
He's not. See, that's why it was a
joke.
joke,
Yeah.
and it's not even used anymore. This community changes very rapidly because
Yeah.
it's an online thing. So that was 2014. Now we're in 2019. Nobody even really talks about it, and they write him off as being a vol-cel, voluntary celibate, a fake cell, not even an incel.
Interesting.
Yeah, and a kind of an idiot, and yeah.
Okay, wow. So it sounds like there's more self-awareness inside the community than previously believed, at least for me walking into this conversation. Mental health issues, are you finding you're running into that issue?
Oh yeah.
With just inside the community, or people you talk to, or both?
Both. The sort of webmaster of their
Yeah.
main site now, he even has done polls. He does them every 6 months of his members, and the people that would consider themselves as having a kind of a mental illness or something, mental health issues like even anxiety, depression, autism, it's like 80% or more.
Really?
Might even be, yeah. And I'm not finding that to be untrue. I mean, it makes sense, but when people are isolated, whatever the causality of that is, it would lead to depression, and people that have mental health issues are more likely to be isolated as well.
I'm so interested in this because it's not what you expect. It keeps being surprising, and I'm trying to think of like other groups like that exist online that are mostly male, and like in my head I come up with like a fantasy football league, right?
Right.
Like how many of those people would even though they do it, they play the game, they're there in front of their computer alone in most cases, but I don't think 80% of them would say I have a mental illness or
no.
Yeah. So it's interesting. Like I'm trying to put my finger on it and I can't.
Well, I mean, I think there's a few issues here. Like one being, causation versus correlation. Like if you are indeed rejected a lot by the opposite sex, whatever the reason for that is, oftentimes one of the reasons might be a mental illness or something like autism, because it's trouble connecting socially and reading social cues. And there's a large representation of that in the community. Then you are more likely to become depressed, especially as a young man, I think. Being rejected by women is like one of your main sort of ways to kind of evaluate yourself.
Yeah.
And so I think in our society where there's online dating and things based on your photograph and social media and everything, people who get rejected a lot might be rejected more because it's just a photograph, and now they're finding this. So, like, they're looking online and they're finding this.
So you have an acting background, and I kind of do too. But a big part of doing that is dealing with rejection,
Right?
Constant rejection, because even if you book like 2% of the auditions you go on, you're a friggin' superstar.
Yes, absolutely.
So is that like? Do you understand a little bit more about rejection than these people do, I guess? Like, I guess what I'm saying is rejection's a part of life no matter what you do. Some jobs, like acting, you have to deal with it more. I suppose men, when trying to have a relationship, deal with it more than women.
Yeah, I'd say so.
But it's just a part of life. Like, it's not a reason to get angry and, it's a cliche, but every no you get brings you one step closer to a yes.
Yes. Yeah, that's true. And it's something that I, bring up sometimes. But, you put the question, you phrased it as, do you understand more about it than they do?
Yeah.
And, probably, I'm probably older than most of them too, but it made me think, actually, just to frame that a little differently, I think I understand it and they do. I think that there's something in their darkness that I can kind of relate to in a strange way. And rejection and isolation and being judged on your appearance is huge part of acting, as you know. I guess in a very different way, I can understand the frustration with that.
Mm-hmm.
Feeling like that makes people just write you off must be very frustrating.
Yeah. Okay, Naama. So tell us what your first episode is about.
So my first episode gets into kind of it's a little bit of why I'm interested in it, and then kind of the history of the internet and social media and the website and stuff like that. Gets into that. And then it's kind of like a little introduction into what some of the content of some of the sites is. I have my friend Saxon, Old Man Saxon, who's a rapper, like reading some of the posts, which is interesting. And it's mostly I'm doing it chronologically. So what I started, like my first contact, my first interviews, doing this and researching it, I'm kind of starting with those.
Yeah.
And the first ones are not really, there's a clip of an incel, but it's before I had spoken to anyone from the sites. It's someone that was kind of outside of it and has a lot to say about it. So,
okay, is there anything else you want to tell the audience you want them to know before they start listening to your show?
Keep an open mind and, just kind of bear with it. It's going to cover, like you said, a lot of different perspectives.
Well, thank you very much for joining us here today, Naama. This is a really interesting project. I can't wait to see where it goes.
Thank you.